this natural stone wall. Go through the whole procedure of how this came about.
We're just going to pour a foundation out as part of what's going to be holding up this hillside. We're going to use our crowbar and hammer. We just dump and mix the black gravel,
Put pieces
slot into the H-bar
out of the rocks I have behind me.
so the concrete will stick to it. Gentle and take your time.
Close the door and leave the light on. The morning light should be coming soon. Kick off your shoes and leave the winter and the pain it brings to you. Lay your head upon my shoulder. Shut off your thoughts and clear your mind.
One of the features we put in this terraced system was this natural stone wall that ties into our hollow block wall. Go through the whole procedure of how this came about, show it how it's done.
First thing we need to do is excavate an area so we can pour a foundation for this stone wall. We don't have a lot of space to work with here, having to dig this out from underneath the deck and between these stumps, but we just do the best we can. We're just trying to excavate enough dirt out of here to get a foundation about 150 mil thick. I'm going to build a small form for this foundation using our treated pine. This form will stay in the ground and creates a border for this wall. But first I'm going to have to rip one of our sleepers in half to get it to the right dimensions. I've set myself up with plenty of space to cut this timber out of the way of where we're working and close to my chop saw. Now that the timber has been ripped down to the right thickness for our foundation, we'll just cut it to size and then go and install it under the deck. The complete form for this stone wall is going to be quite extensive as we have to tie it into a retaining wall for the garden bed. So today we're just going to construct the bottom part of it to get some concrete in the ground and complete the rest later. We're just going to pour a foundation out that's significantly deep and strong, as this small stone wall is part of the entire retaining wall system, even though it looks separate when it's finished because of the decorative stone. From an engineering point of view, it's interconnected to our hollow block wall and is part of what's going to be holding up this hillside. So it has to have a lot of concrete and steel reinforcement to be strong enough to not fail. Once we've agitated all the concrete in and smoothed it off, we're going to let it rest for the day and come back and continue this part of the project tomorrow. While we let this concrete dry, we're going to go rip out the forms on one of our previous pours over on our ramp section.
Another hot summer night, sitting back in the light, trying to find the worst in the sky.
Often our screws are jammed up with concrete in them from the concrete pour, so we just use another screw to drill out the void in the top of the screw so we can get our impact driver in and remove it properly. After removing the small blocks that hold this larger piece of timber in, there should be nothing attaching it to the system, so we're just going to use our crowbar and hammer to tap it out and leverage it out. As we've done before in our previous form rip-outs, we always clean all the timbers thoroughly after pulling them out because they'll be used many times throughout this project. We take our time and try and be as gentle as possible in leveraging these timbers out so we don't damage our concrete. Sometimes you think a piece of timber should be able to come out after removing the blocks that are holding it in, but there's often a hidden screw that you haven't taken out.
It had summer night, sitting back in the light.
Once that hidden screw is removed, this timber comes out quite easily. We just continue the process of removing the screws and the timbers from this form, and maybe kind of enjoy the fact that we've done all this hard work and this concrete's coming out really nice, and soon we're actually going to have our ramp system to move all our block through.
I'm so much closer than I was to you. before this time.
I find a lot of satisfaction with pouring concrete
Before this time.
because it's a wet, sloppy mud when you put it in the mould. But when you pull your forms apart, it's like hardened granite. It's very satisfying. Part of me managing my construction process on a job like this is to have little pours of concrete going in different places. So as we're waiting for one to set up and harden, we can rip out the forms in another.
I haven't fallen far from you. So much closer than I was to you.
Getting this ramp landing finished is really important because at this point we don't have any wheeled access down to the lower part of the yard, or we have to take all the concrete block and build that stone wall. So by finishing off this part of the ramp, we can get gravel in here, and then I can use my wheelbarrow to bring materials in. I'm just digging out some buried packers under this concrete because we try and recycle all the parts we can from this process. So we're recycling all the packers, all the screws. We give the place a bit of a sweep, and it's ready to put our gravel in this form. We're going to start out filling this void with some leftover concrete from our demolition earlier.
Another hot summer night, sitting back in the light.
We're just spreading out these lumps of concrete so the black gravel can fit in between them to get a really good base. Our system for filling this void is to mix the black gravel with our broken concrete. So we put it in layers. We just dump and mix the black gravel over our broken concrete. We just compact it by stamping on it with our feet, and then we just keep adding more layers. More recycled concrete spread out, and then black gravel on top, and then stomp it in, and just keep repeating the process until we've filled our platform.
Before this time. Before this time.
And this area is going to get a lot of traffic over the next few weeks whilst we build the wall, so the gravel will just become more and more compacted. Once the square platform's completely filled and flat with gravel, we get started on the bottom ramp system. Here I'm using much larger pieces of recycled concrete to create a really stable base for this ramp. And then we just repeat the same process we did for the platform. We just keep adding black gravel, raking it in, compacting it.
Maybe it's time to see the truth. I haven't fallen far from you. I'm so much closer than I was to you before this time.
With our ramp all filled with gravel, we're going to get back to building this natural stone wall. But first we've got to build some treated timber retaining wall elements that tie into the garden bed that's going to be in the center of this wall.
Just fixing in what's going to be the backing of our natural stone wall we're putting in here.
We're building a treated timber retaining wall around the edge of this deck, which is going to hold the garden bed in and also be the back form of our natural stone wall. So we prefabbed some parts to make it easier for ourselves to build a structure that has to wrap around the bottom of this deck. So everything can line up with this deck properly, we're building this treated timber form wall from the top down.
This was just a temporary brace to hold it at the right height whilst we locked it off into the deck.
Now that this top sleeper is secure to the deck, we can remove this prop.
This natural stone wall is going to be incorporated into the block wall over here in the corner with concrete and rebar, which will help support it. It'll also give my concrete wall strength, because every time you put a corner in a retaining wall, it adds more strength to it. Now that I've got the side all fixed, I can start to work on this back section, put pieces under here.
The treated timber sleepers just slot into the H-bar. We just get them snug up against each other and then screw them off.
Trying to find the words to describe something Maybe it's time to see the truth. I haven't fallen on you.
Just got a few more pieces to fill out that bottom void, and then we're ready to start building our natural stone wall out of the rocks I have behind me here. So we've put a first course of stone along this piece of timber here as a form for the stone to lay up against. Sometimes we use wire, or we wedge concrete in the back of it, like here, using some scrap pieces from my blocks over here. The idea is to try and keep all this natural cut stone or naturally formed stone as flat to this form as possible. Then we're going to pour concrete in the back of it.
With our first course of stone secure and ready, we wet it all down so the concrete will stick to it really nicely, and we start backfilling it with our concrete. The process here is to quite gently add the concrete into this form without bumping any of the stones, as they're only leaning up against our form. This can be done if you're gentle and take your time. Then we work it in with our trowel so the concrete gets a good adhesion to the stone. I've also used a custom concrete mix for this process, which contains a shovel load of mortar mixed in with our normal 6:1 formula of Portland cement, plus bondcrete, which helps the concrete adhere to the pre-existing foundation slab and also adhere to all our stone.
Can you see and can you feel? Can you show me why you believe it?
I insert small pieces of recycled concrete, like little wedges, to help stiffen up these stones against the formwork, and then work them into the concrete with my trowel. This is all part of my system for getting these natural stones to stay flat against the formwork. We just keep repeating the process of adding more concrete and adding bits of recycled concrete as wedges until the concrete gets up to the top of the stones. We continue to thoroughly work it with our trowel to make sure we're getting a good adhesion throughout the whole system. We pour concrete into the hollow block system, as this is a way of us tying in this new wall into the hollow block wall. We make sure we work the concrete in thoroughly around all the rebar and this hollow block, as this is a connection point between the two walls and we want it to be as strong as possible. After adding the last batch of concrete, we smooth everything out with our trowel best we can.
Another hot summer night, sitting back in a light,
and add small pieces of rebar to help it bond to the next layer we're going to be pouring later.
We'll give it a day or two to dry up and pull this off, see how she's looking, and then we can sort of raise this up as we go.
Join me on the next episode as we bring more material in to build up this stone wall.
We're using this pink granite over here, and the idea is that across here we have natural stone and tie into our charcoal concrete block that wraps around this way. We lay the stones up to the front of our form here to keep it flat as it goes up. Really work it in all those crevices, pushing it in, and so it can get a really good strong contact.
We'll be building our stone up to the same height as our hollow block wall, and then taking a look under our formwork to see how it's turned out. Thanks for joining me this week in my YouTube channel. Check the link below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe button or make a comment so I can help you with your future construction solutions. And don't forget to follow our channel for more ideas and how-to tips for home and garden projects.